All right, well, I think it's a little bit after 7, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Ellen Minzner, and I am US Rowing's Para High Performance Director. Tom Siddell is our Para Coach Liaison, and I'm going to give him a chance to introduce himself in just a couple of minutes. But while people filter in, just a couple of technical issues about how we want to run this webinar tonight. There's the Q&A feature and the chat feature, and we'd really like it if you have specific questions to put them into the Q&A, and that way we have a good record of them in case we overlook anyone's question, that we don't get to it, or we want to answer it more thoroughly after the presentation. So use the Q&A for your specific questions, and we'll keep the chat for some fun interaction, thank yous, shout outs, whatever you have. So that interactive level will be in the chat, and questions will go in the Q&A. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, cool. So we have a few slides, and we're definitely going to leave about 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. But we've got Tom will be helping to monitor the chat as well as the Q&A. We've also got Sam from US Rowing. It's going to be helping on that back end just to make sure we don't overlook any questions. So I think we're pretty much ready to get going. And so I think we're just going to go ahead and start. I'll just introduce myself just very briefly. You know my title. I've been involved with the para team since 2013, first as a coach and then as high performance director. And I'm really excited for where the growth of para rowing can be and for what our success can be in the future. I will say that this presentation tonight, it may seem a little bit basic, but I think we've been sort of missing that element for a really long time. And my hope that for tonight is that we have a very simple and accessible pathway for people to enter the Paralympic pipeline at every stage of opportunity. So that is the goal for tonight. When we come to convention time, we will take a deep dive into some higher level para elements. But for tonight, it's really all about understanding how to engage with the pipeline and progress through it. So that's the goal of tonight. And I'm joined by my colleague, Tom Siddell, and I'll let him introduce himself and try to explain his role with the para program because he obviously wears many hats as a coach outside of this role. But Tom, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Ellen. So my role with the para group is sort of monitoring the training for all the athletes that fall under the high performance umbrella. That's at all different levels, sort of, development up to, training for world championship Olympic athletes. And Ellen and I spend a lot of time chatting about, sort of the details of the training program, monitoring the physiological side of things. And then, especially last summer as well, in the lead up to the Olympics, some of the strength training aspects as well. So that's what I try to help out with. And then, in the rest of my time, I coach over at Tufts and also at CRI and some of the other local clubs around the Boston area. So excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and Tom kind of came on board, rather fortunately for us. We had already selected the 4 that would attend the World Championships and getting ready for Tokyo when the World Championships were canceled. So at that point, all of our focus was full on Tokyo, and yet we had a significant group of athletes who needed a real coach contact there. So Tom helped develop that intermediary program between the selection of the World Championship and then that sort of hard pivot to a non-competitive fall season for them. And it turned out to be a great resource that we wanted to just kind of keep engaged as we go forward. So I think it's worked out really well, and I'm really happy to have Tom involved in the program. So I just wanted to go next slide. There we go. Just want to give just a basic overview of what we want to be about for 2024 and beyond. And we're going to talk about just 3 things briefly here, because the bulk of this presentation is going to be about the third bullet, the pathway. So we obviously want world-class coaching, and we'll do that through coach education, among other things. So we've got a great group of coaches that work part-time, volunteer, self-funded, some small stipends. But it's really been an amazing effort, and we want to make sure we invest in our own coaches, but also reach out to other coaching talent that can really help us move our program forward. And I'm really excited about doing that moving forward. We want high performance equipment and access to technology for all of the boat classes. That's going to be really important as we move forward into 2024. And most importantly to me, I think right now we really need a clearly defined pathway for new and emerging athletes, talent identification, and long-term athlete development at a few different levels. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, is about this pipeline, how you can engage in it. And, you know, the main goal of this is obviously we want to recruit as many people as possible to para rowing, but we also want to make sure we don't skip steps, that we don't have an athlete who is coming into our program and the only opportunity they know is to try out for the national team because they have eligibility and maybe they're reasonably fit enough and someone said you should go for the team. What we want to do is to make sure that all the athletes, when they come out for a national level selection event, have had appropriate development opportunities, you know, at the junior and development levels, the way we would with any other program. So hopefully you can see that. I'm sharing my screen, so please hop in the chat if it looks like something's not able to be visible right now. So just the three basic levels that we've got a junior, development, and sort of the elite. And junior just represents typical high school junior clubs, U19, U17, U15, whatever those age group categories breakdown are. The development level is simply U23, collegiate, club, or military. A lot of folks that maybe either didn't have high school experience coming into our system through that sort of middle channel. And then the top of that level would be the senior, national team, and elite. So I think we're going to spend a lot of time on this slide, just kind of helping people understand what we would like people to do. I just try to put the verbs up at the top of this this slide here. So we want people to go from left to right as they think about entering the US Paralympic pipeline. And this is true for any athlete at any of these levels. The first thing we want you to do is submit a baseline metrics form. And these forms will be on the final slide and everyone will get the slides at the end. So this is just a real entry level submission of data. You don't even need to be a rower at this point. The baseline metrics are some height, weight, wingspan, seated height if you're a fixed seat athlete, and some basic strength movements like a floor push-up, an inverted row, and if you're a PR3, a trap bar deadlift. So one of the reasons we want to have that baseline form is that we need data. We want to move into an era where we actually can do make data-driven decisions. We really don't have a lot of data on any of our athletes. So this baseline metrics form is something that any athlete will submit once, maybe twice a year. So we're going to get these metrics as athletes move through the system. And then after a while, we'll have enough data that we can start to help identify and shape what we think is the ideal profile for a PR2 or a PR1 or a PR3 athlete. So we've got several submissions already from that, and it's never too late to submit that. You can do that at any time. And in addition to giving us the data collection, it also initiates a communication process. Much like filling out a recruiting questionnaire on a collegiate website, this gives us enough information that it comes to myself and Tom, and we look at it, and we then reach out to the coach and maybe the athlete specifically and start figuring out, like, where really is this athlete? Are they someone we want to look at right away for a national team? Have they done the appropriate steps? So that next step is sort of a coach consult there, and that's a bit where Tom comes in. And maybe, Tom, can you speak a little bit about what your role has been already for a few athletes who have needed some direction in the pipeline here?
Yeah, definitely. So after we have those baseline metrics in the sort of the initial contact with people, we're trying to sort out, you know, are they more on that development level, the intermediate, or closer to the national team area? And depending on where they're at, we can help work, from a physiological standpoint with the team that they're currently training with the coach that they're currently training with, or if they're training on their own. And that's sort of my specific role, is how can we fit you with a training program that can help you progress forward, meet some of the goals we're looking for, and help you kind of follow along with the training program that Ellen and I put out, and submit the right information at the right time that will get you what you want down the road.
Yeah. And the beauty of this stage of the process is it's not intended only for the elite. We've already received information for athletes who do have a permanent verifiable disability, but they may not have Paralympic eligibility. We still want to hear from you, because at that stage we can refer you to Deb Arenberg and that whole host of domestic programs if you need to get connected to a program, or connect you with different events that you can still actively participate and compete in. So we want to hear from a lot of people at that level. The other thing that you'll get, after talking with Tom and myself, is there's 3 separate calendars that go along with those junior, development, and senior elite. So it also shows you the appropriate things you should be preparing for, the competitions we'd like you to engage in, the opportunities we want you to have on your radar so that you're ready for those. So that coach consult is a real sort of starting point to direct you where in the pipeline you should be thinking about going next. So then we want you to initiate the classification process. I put that third for a specific reason. Mainly, the classification process is really for us to help determine, eligibility in para events for domestic and international competition. But it need not be the very first thing that you do. We want athletes to engage in the process, enjoy the activity, maybe try out some indoor competitions. Classification can be a stressful process, I think, especially if that's your very first thing that you're going to do with para rowing. And we'll guide you to make sure you have everything that you need to compete appropriately. But initiating that process, it does take several steps. It's a review of eligible impairments. There's a medical form, and often lots of back and forth between you and your physician to make sure you've got all the right documentation. And then there's a FISA medical form to request the classification. So that can take a lot of time. And I don't want to have an athlete not engage with our system because they're just taking too much time in that initial classification phase. So again, all those forms will be at the back, but that's kind of what we want you to do. We want to hear from you first. We want to know what you are and what your goals are initially, and where we think you might fall in this pathway. And throughout this, we're talking also, I want to make it clear that we're talking to coaches and athletes, because I think the very best coach that an athlete can have in this process is the one that they work with day to day. So when we talk with the coaches and figure out what level you're at, it's always communication is the coach and athlete together, coach and athlete together. So in that little way, we are also educating our coaches, educating more people about the process, so that a young athlete or a new athlete isn't left to their own devices to figure out, where do I go, or what race should I do? So that's going to be a really important piece of our communication, is that all communication after we get that baseline metrics is with the coach and the athlete, or even possibly the athlete's parents if they happen to be a junior rower without a coach. Then obviously we want you to get training. We want you to have a reasonable training plan. We generally want to make sure, if you're under the guidance of a high school coach, club coach, college coach, or military coach, we're not trying to change your training program. We're trying to be a resource that gives you an example of what kinds of things we're doing at the national team level that you might get to one day. But again, we're trying to bolster what the clubs can do, what their awareness is of what we're doing. So we're not here to tell anybody, switch your training program, everybody's got to do the same thing. No, we just want to make sure that as you train, you're aware of when and what to submit as a junior, when and what to submit as a development U23 pre-elite, so to speak, when and what to submit as a senior national team candidate. Those are the really important things about the training program, is that we all know what goals we're going for in terms of performance. And there's many ways to get there. And we want you, all the athletes and coaches, to feel like supported in what you do, but aware of what we're looking for. Tom, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say, to echo what you said, again, we're not trying to put out one training program and this is the only way to go forward. Probably just trying to find different ways to slice the same thing that everybody's doing now. And how can we provide more resources? How can we provide some input? And what I've found in the last few months is sometimes the athletes just want somebody different to talk to that's not their direct coach. There's no pressure in the situation. It helps them, figure out a problem or sort out something in their training where they don't feel like it's, based around the selection at their home team or something like that. It's just another place to bounce ideas around.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I'll tell one sort of story about an athlete who, found us pretty early on, as we were just even formulating this idea of having this baseline metric so that we know about athletes. And this athlete hadn't competed in rowing really at all, and found a rowing machine in a gym, wanted to get involved and fill out this baseline form. And it turns out he's like an incredible athlete. And this is somebody we'd be really excited about in the future. And without a pipeline, we might make the mistake, as I have probably made in the past myself, of encouraging this person too quickly into the national team because we don't have these intermediate steps. But we're building out calendars for each of those levels. We're not creating events. We're just taking existing events that we can help steer athletes to at different levels. And I'm really excited about that, so that athletes know what's in front of them, and they may be, very far off an elite standard in one area, but there's still important development steps in front of them that they can do and can be successful at. So that's kind of our goal. Does anyone
Ellen,
have
just to jump in with one more thing really quick on the training. One other aspect that I think has been important over the last few months is we've had a monthly email blast to all the athletes and coaches that are on our radar. And we just sort of do an overview of the month, the big things that are happening that month, training, submission wise, sort of an overview of the training program and any, events or things that are coming up. And I think that's, again, if there wasn't enough reasons to fill out the baseline metrics form, just to even stay in touch with what's happening each month and jump on that email train, I think is great too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we'll hopefully have a lot more people on that next time, and even the monthly call. We'll talk about that at the end as well. So, does anyone have any questions right now? I haven't been monitoring the Q&A myself or the chat. Any questions? Raise your hand, or we'll just kind of go on to some of the other different levels there. Okay. So I thought it'd be helpful to kind of identify what we had in mind. As I mentioned, for each of the junior development and sort of senior elite, there are 3 parallel calendars. And we just want to identify like what a typical athlete might do in a junior category. Again, we want to be working with the athlete within their current environment. As long as that environment is safe and productive for them, that's where we want to have them stay and be supported, but have appropriate level competitions and targets in front of them. So at this level, we're going to just work with the athlete's current club setup and coach, make sure they're having fun, and to be able to begin competing safely. Now, a PR3, and that's if you're really new and just kind of learning about para rowing, PR3 is essentially the athletes who use a sliding seat. Their disability doesn't prohibit them from using their lower body and their legs in the rowing stroke. So those athletes can generally participate in traditional high school junior teams. Some may have an impairment that's such that they can't, but for the most part, that's a reasonable pathway. PR1 and PR2, because those high school teams currently are still centered on team boats with sliding seats, generally PR1 or PR2 at this age range is generally in a club or an individualized program. And by individualized program, You know, CrossFit, there are young kids involved in CrossFit. There, it's more like individualized, or they participate in a club with some one-to-one coaching. So that's generally the typical way that PR 1, 2, and 3 participate at this level. And there are some cool target opportunities we want athletes at that level to be thinking about. The first is one we'll hear a little bit more about at convention, which is the Para ODP camp, which is basically takes upon the success of the Olympic Development Program, ODP, that has been going on for, I think, I don't know, 3 years. So Tom, you coached at that too. Yeah, 3 years.
Yeah, I think it's been about 3.
Yeah, so it's a lot of fun, age group, and that program moving forward is going to be inclusive of athletes in the appropriate age and ability range for athletes with disability. I think we had one PR3 athlete participate this year. This past year, and this coming year, we want to be prepared for PR 1, 2, and 3 participating in that sort of integrated camp setting. So more to come on that. That will be exciting. The Beata Regatta has been around for quite a long time, and it's down in Philadelphia. The great thing about that is it's a lot of athletes, very first competition, but they also offer a classification opportunity there. So that's going to be an important event on the calendar for somebody at that level. The head of the queue is a sculling race only, a junior sculling race only that happens in Boston. And they haven't had para participation yet, from what I know, but organizers are ready. The beauty of it is it's all single sculling, and they'll take any athlete who can row a single, pontoons, no pontoons, any category. All you have to do is really submit the what you think your estimated time would be. So the head of the queue is going to be a great race. They're ready to take on juniors in, I think they go down as far as U14 in that category. So that'd be a really fabulous place to get a start. We've got, in fact, I liked it so much, I put it twice on the bullets here. So Angel City Games is another exciting opportunity. We've got our friends from Row LA have partnered up with the Angel City Sports out in LA. And Angel City Games is a multi-sport event. They've got all kinds of inclusive sports opportunities for people with and without disabilities, track and field, bocce, basketball. I can't even remember. They've got like 20 different sports, and rowing is now going to be one of those sports moving forward. Currently it's indoor, but it will be on the water. We're really hoping for big things as we move into 2028 to have that as kind of a base of athlete talent, interest in the sport of rowing for when the Paralympics come to LA. We've got US Rowing Indoors Crash Bee, which is virtual. Anyone can do it. It's great when you have access to a rowing machine. US Rowing Regionals, and then Youth Nationals, and still open to others. But we thought those are the most appropriate competitions that were open and prepared for athletes with disabilities at that level, and will give athletes a huge base of competitive experience just by running through that particular calendar. So if anyone has any suggestions about that, then put it in the chat, put it in the Q&A, and we'll start fleshing out an even more robust calendar for this level.
Ellen, while we have just a moment in your switching slides, there was a chat sent just about how to get on the mailing list for that monthly email or that monthly meeting. Do you want to save that to the end, or
Yeah, well, what I will say is that the first thing I want to do is to fill out that baseline metrics, because the mailing list is really a bit of a background for people that are on the senior training program. And we're happy to share that training program, but we know that not everybody is going to be utilizing that training program. So a bit of a caveat, like I selfishly want to have the baseline metrics, but if you're a coach and you just want to have access to the training program, sure, we can maybe figure out a way to just take people's email. We can offer it to people who are on this call tonight or on this webinar. We will have a general para newsletter that's going to start on a quarterly basis in January. So that will be a little bit more broad. But the email and the training program that goes out with Tom, those athletes are specifically already on the elite training program and submitting scores at that level. So it's a bit of a smaller audience, but it's not by no means meant to be exclusive. We just want to make sure it's in the proper context. So we can kind of sort through that. But anyone who wants to figure that out, then we'll follow up with you for sure. So then we have typical development level, U23, collegiate, military. Again, we're still working with the athletes' current club setup and their coach. And at this point, we do want to establish clear training and competition objectives. So at the junior level, we have some training objectives and some races. We want to make sure people are entering it and having fun and in a good environment. And here we do have clear training and competition objectives. So PR3, again, the successful PR3 national team or Paralympic candidate is going to have collegiate experience. I can think of only a few athletes who have been successful. It's not that you can't be successful, but your odds are greater if making the Paralympic team in the PR3 category is something that is on your agenda. Traditional collegiate or club sweep rowing teams is the best route. Now at the PR1 and PR2, again, come from many different pathways, maybe not even have any high school or junior rowing experience. We have crossover sports. We have high-level athletes who were injured or acquired their impairment later in life, even after their collegiate career. So again, generally, because we have their sculling events at the Olympic team anyway, a Paralympic team, but generally they're coming from outside of a collegiate or traditional club team program. And athletes at this level should begin submitting regular ERG scores and any competition results, again, via a results form that's at the end. And there's some great target competitions here as well. So the Dadvale has really stepped up in a big way for collegiate rowers with verifiable impairments. They also include intellectual learning disabilities. I don't want to speak out of turn. I'm not sure if Taylor is on here or not, but they're open to a broad range of disabilities. The main requirement is they do want you to represent your college. So I think the Dadvale have really stepped up and we want to support them and make sure that they have great full events down there. And they've just been really awesome. Again, Beata down in Philly, this is also a great regatta to keep on the development calendar. And at this point, if you can work it into your schedule and you're not obligated by your collegiate season, the para national team speed orders are a great place to sort of literally test your speed somewhat informally before you take that next step to an elite level selection event. Again, US Rowing Indoors or Crash Bees, national championships, which this year will be, let's see, US Para Trials will be, I'm not sure if they're going to be exactly in conjunction with those, but US Rowing Nationals having para events. This past year, they were also intended to be the World Championship Trials, but had to pivot based on the cancellation of the World Championships. But US Rowing Nationals have a full complement of the para events, and that's very exciting. San Diego Crew Classic has been a huge draw for the military competitors that Deb Arenberg organizes, so that's super exciting. And then Canadian Henley, they have dash racing as well as the 2,000 meter racing for para categories, and that's been a great development tool for the group in Boston, certainly, that we've brought there before, and it definitely is a great one to keep on the radar at that level. Let's see. We've
got a message in the Q&A here from Monica. For the military, is this only for wounded warriors, or is PTSD and brain injuries included?
Generally speaking, the military definition of disability is what applies here. So from my understanding, and I'll make sure Deb follows up with you, it is not just the strict PR 1, 2, 3 Paralympic eligibility, but includes a broader range of disabilities, including PTSD. Great question, though, and I will definitely, the military, they have we're working really hard. I realize that's a small bullet point for such a huge segment of our population, and again, more to come on that, because we're working really hard to coordinate what we think of as our pipeline with their pipeline of opportunities that rise to the different branches. So we hope to have more specific information. You probably even run, a full webinar just on that topic alone, which I hope we have in the future. So we'll definitely, more to come on that. So stay tuned. Does anyone have any other questions about that? I know we've kind of, again, covered a lot so far. And in the final slide, we're going to go over some of those forms and talk about some of the other resources that are available. But if anyone has any other events they want to add or questions about these different levels, you can let me know or throw something in the chat. And if not, we'll just kind of start then talking about resources and move to the general discussion type Q&A. Does that make sense? Okay. So senior national team, ideally, and this is not true of every single national team member, we're trying to build this pipeline so that by the time athletes come to the senior team, they have at least 2 to 4 years of, pretty good competition at the previous levels before they participate in a senior selection event. And the truth of it is that the most successful Paralympic athletes are going to be able to go through 2 Olympic cycles. So this is very important that we don't skip steps. We don't introduce people to the highest level of competition too early in their career. There's all kind of risk and burnout issues there. So we want to make sure they have a good, solid background of competing at these various events before they get to the national team. At this level, the athletes are more working directly with a para-national team coach, or they're at a training center. So at this point, the communication is more direct with the athletes themselves, with Tom or myself. And so that's how the training gets managed. And there's a high level of independence with what we expect those athletes to be doing. We monitor the training through training peaks. We know when they're doing workouts and when they're not, or at least when they've turned their heart rate monitors on. So we're able to, with Tom's help and the use of training peaks, able to see, monitor, and make recommendations on the training of elite athletes, even when they are not training with us on a day-to-day basis. So that's been helpful, and that's where Tom really comes in as a huge resource, because I can't answer all of the nuanced questions that an athlete at this level has for their training program. Simply just don't have the time and focus, but that's where Tom's come in and been really helpful. Been able to individualize some training, whether it be strength or adjusting the overall volume. So I think that's been a huge resource for some of the athletes, especially because Tom's not involved in selection. He only is here to help people. And I think that that's been a real asset, so that we can make sure that all the athletes have appropriate resources that they can go to make sure that they're the best that they can be when they get into that selection level event. And Tom, am I kind of missing anything in terms of that? I mean, that's kind of the most in-depth one-to-one interactions that you have are with athletes who are kind of already at this senior national team level.
Yeah, that's what I'd say. And maybe the only other aspect is, at this point, most people have full-time jobs, or are, I think we have a couple maybe PhD candidates, and that type of life. And so hopefully where we're able to help is they're super motivated. How do we balance that motivation and have them train intelligently, and also account for all the stuff that comes along with just life and work as well?
Yeah. And so for these athletes, the target competitions are for sure speed orders, national championships and US para trials. Gavarati is our World Cup, so to speak. It's a fabulous regatta and multiple events. And we try and run at least athletes over there for international classification, but hopefully in the future that we're there for, that's our regular World Cup, testing the water, seeing where we are against the other countries that are entering the para events. And it's our real tune-up or what we need to work on still as we come back and then prepare for the World Rowing Championships or the Paralympic Games. So that's kind of a very just simplified aspect of how, you know, you'll have some contact with the team and the national team staff as you sort of enter the pipeline. And as you get further up the pipeline, then that's where there's a lot of the intense monitoring of athletes, communication back and forth with athletes, and just making sure that everybody has the best opportunity to perform at their best when they get to the selection level event or international competition. Also at this level, there are resources available for direct athlete support, elite athlete health insurance, some travel stipends, some funded travel. So we wish we had more resources, but we try and do our best that when an athlete is ready for that next step, that we have some resources to really support them financially and support the travel so they can get the international experience that they need to then do well and get to the podium for the World Championships or the Paralympic Games. And then the last slide is just some information. As we said, these are Google Forms that you'll get the slide deck, I believe, from this presentation after the fact. So again, the baseline metrics form. There's another form for submitting your national team results, whether they be erg scores or erg submissions, or even on water. The Google form is set to accept any type of result that you want to submit, and we'll track it. And that has been really helpful when athletes have put not just the required 6K or 2K score in, but let us know what you're doing on water. It's really helpful. Coaches can request the calendar or the training plan. Just let me know. My email is there. I think everybody knows that or will have that, and I'll put it in the chat before we close this. So that's where we'll start hearing from coaches and athletes about what calendar, where the most appropriate level is for them. Para-rowing classification. Wendy Wilbur is our US rowing contact for athlete services. And she's the one you need to ask questions to if you need to be thinking about competing at the elite level in the current year, because there's a whole host of other requirements that you're going to need to have in order to be eligible for speed orders, selection camps, trials, etc. And we need to be on top of those as early in the year as possible. So we're trying to steer people, if they think they need classification for the current year at a senior level, we want Wendy on that as soon as possible, ideally before January 15th, I think is what we're trying to do. And then for athletes who intend to compete at the junior development or other levels, or not planning on competing internationally in the current year, Deb Ehrenberg will help get that classification going and find appropriate time and schedule and classification panel so that you're ready to compete in the domestic competition that you are interested in. I also want to point out that we just had our Para High Performance Committee meet a week ago, last week. So we've got our version of the national team selection procedures are currently posted for comment. They will be up until the 26th. You can find them at the link on this presentation, but it's also on the USRowing.org under Team USA selection procedures. You can find them there. So you can feel free to comment. The comments go directly to myself or to the chair of our high performance committee, and then they'll be hopefully ready to go after that, but they're up for comment now. Tom, am I leaving anything out as far as the forms and resources go? I know we're going to try and figure out how to get everybody on this training program, and email, but we'll work on that. Anything else that we're forgetting?
No, I think that summarizes most of it. The only other thing I'd add is, maybe this is a little bit personal, but I feel like this is just a really exciting time to be a part of this group. And, with Ellen's sort of vision and direction and a lot of the other coaches that are involved, we've had some really dynamic meetings. And I think there's some really exciting stuff on the horizon for this. And I'm super excited to be a part of it. And I think anybody that wants to throw their name out there on that baseline metrics form, we can definitely figure out how to help and how to get you connected with the right people. And I'm just super, super excited for the future of this.
Yeah, I agree. And this presentation and all this sort of nuts and bolts of a process and the different levels, I mean, that really came from that discussion of realizing we needed 2 levels of training and 2 levels of coach attention at the exact same time in August of last year. And so I also just want to give a shout out to Wayne Berger, Beth Knoll, Tom West, and little by little, that little inner circle has grown. Jenny Sitchell's now on it. Alice Henderson is now on it. Susan Wood, Liz Eiler. I gotta learn how to pronounce that name right. I'm so sorry. And I know she's on the call tonight, so I'll hear about it. But it really has been collaborative there. Oh, I got it. Yay. So it has been really collaborative, but it's just been, we want to give the easiest way possible for the general public who is interested in para rowing. We want to hear from you, to the athlete who may know that they're eligible and have this competitive desire, but have no idea how to engage with us. We want to put this foundation out there first before we get into every technical aspect of para rigging and para training and all of that stuff. So I really appreciate all the work those coaches have put in, because as Tom mentioned, we've been meeting monthly just to discuss all of this stuff and see where we are with new athletes, emerging athletes, existing athletes, et cetera. So it really is a group effort here. So I'm just going to give a shout out to everybody. And I hope I didn't leave anyone off. Oh, I did leave someone off. Jeff Keller is our PT who is on site every week at CRI and is also working on a PT screening. So we often hear many athletes or many coaches feel like, well, I really want to help, but I don't want to do any harm. Well, we're trying to give you some tools to help you screen your athlete, and are they ready to engage in a serious training program, yes or no. And Jeff's been the para national team physical therapist for the last few years, and he's going to be helping with that. It's not quite ready yet, but it will be ready soon. So appreciate everybody. So, awesome. We going to open it up for questions or comments or any conversation that you want to have. I'm aware that there's a Patriots game tonight, and there's also, I think, a lunar eclipse. Is that tonight or tomorrow? So I'm sure people have big plans. We'll try and stop right at 8, but if anyone does have any questions, we've got about 15, maybe even 20 minutes left of the time here. So we've got some great coaches also in the chat that aren't necessarily on the panel here. So feel free to ask questions or discuss or anything you want to add. I'm looking at, somebody said that they've got a frostbite regatta in Wichita. Yeah, open to bringing para athletes to the regatta. That's great. I mean, I think one of the things we're learning about regatta racing is we don't need perfect before we begin. I know there's a lot of people here who helped get para and inclusion rowing onto the head of the Charles. And, we're still not perfect at that. So where we have people that are willing and it can be done safely, I do think it's going to be really great to see more opportunities for para rowers to get on the water and get that kind of competitive experience that we know they're going to need if they ever really want to be successful at the international level. So that's super exciting. Anyone else? Questions? Oh, something in the Q&A.
Something in the Q&A here, yeah.
I can't open that Q&A, Tom, can you?
Oh, sure. There was a question, is inclusion rowing part of racing?
Inclusion rowing is definitely part of racing. it is not necessarily part of racing at the Paralympic or the World Championships, but it plays a really important role in how we get people on the water. Um, Inclusion racing is by definition team racing. Generally, the crew will have a mix of people with and without disabilities. And there are a number of athletes for whom jumping into a single to compete is not the right thing, nor is jumping into an eight the right thing. But the Paralympic categories are fairly restrictive. And there's no cookie cutter. There are so many people who need some type of accommodation to compete, and that to compete fairly do warrant their own category. And that could be anything from intellectual impairment, deaf, hard of hearing is not a Paralympic category, but certainly depending on the level of impairment is really, really challenging to race independently. So there's any number of reasons why inclusion racing should be part of our agenda. It just happens to not fit at the international elite Paralympic level. But they have inclusion racing. Canadian Henley, at least in recent years, doesn't require the full crew to have a disability. They'd allow, because it's hard to sometimes put a four out, that has everybody have the disability. So inclusion racing, I'm a fan. It helps more people get on the water, racing and competing. So I like that. It's just that the opportunities for inclusion racing are generally domestic, not international yet. Generally speaking.
We've got a few more in the Q&A here. For this one is for coaches. Is there a place for us to get more training? I would give a quick shout out to the USRowing systems, level 1, level 2, level 3, but Ellen, maybe you can jump into that a little deeper.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the answer is yes. We want to be more organized with our resources, but for me, if you can coach rowing, you can coach para rowing. So we ought to be as professional as we possibly can with our own coaching. I'm old enough and have enough gray hair that I did level 3, like with Hartmut in I don't know, 2006, maybe. I have no idea. I'm signed up for level 3 next time because I'm fully aware that what I learned at that level 3, it may still be relevant, but it's certainly not as up to date as I could be. So I think the level 3 coaches and coach education is going to be intermingled with references to para all throughout as we move forward. And then we're going to be able to offer some deep dives into things like the PR1. That is a complicated setup where we learn that we wish there was an easy thing to tell everybody, this is how you set up a PR1 athlete. It's just highly bespoke, and we want to be able to make sure people have the appropriate resources there. So there will be some deep dives available on how we do that. We're learning as we go, but if you can coach rowing, you can coach para rowing. There are just a few considerations that you want to have and make sure that you're able to serve the athletes that are in your program or that may want to join your program. And more to come on that, and I'll put US Rowing on the spot after that. But we are developing those, and yes, there's going to be more coach education. I'll give you just a quick example. I just came across some research, fairly scientific research about the PR1 setup and angle of the seat back. I thought it was fascinating. You could take a deep dive just on that. So among that coaches call that we have, we're probably going to put together some type of PR1 working group so we can look at this information, find out what's realistic for us to utilize about this information in our clubs, and then get that information out to even a more broader audience. So if you want to be part of our PR1 working group to be formed, please let us know. We would love to have more eyes on this. So hopefully that answers the question a little bit, but there's a para rowing manual. But as far as coach education, I think we're just developing more things around the convention and other modules of level 2 that will be a bit more specific to para rowing. I see a question also from Liz. Is there anyone who focuses on blind or visually impaired athletes, and are blind athletes considered para athletes? Yes, PR3 includes visual impairment as an eligible impairment. So yes, depending on the level of visual impairment, that classification also has its own unique parameters, but I don't know that there's any club who focuses specifically on blind and visually impaired athletes for rowing, but the US Association of Blind Athletes, USABA, is a tremendous resource. They support different sport activities, championships, and competitions. So USABA is a great resource for visually impaired athletes in general, but blind athletes are considered para athletes. It depends on the level of impairment.
And we've got a few more in the Q&A here. One is, what resources are there for people wanting to start para programs? I'm guessing maybe starting it at their own club, their own rowing club.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say that Deb Arenberg, she's kind of in charge of our domestic programs for para and military. She's in charge of Freedom Row. So Deb Arenberg has a good number of resources there that she can share, and I think probably she's listed there under classification, but also is domestic programs for para and adaptive, and she's got tremendous resources there, so she would be the one to contact for that.
And last one I'm seeing in the Q&A for right now, any regattas that come to mind with sort of maybe low stakes for novice or developmental athletes?
Let's create them. I do think, the head of the queue is great, but of course that's age restricted. I would love to have, I've hosted development camps in the past where we're a little bit more friendly, no selection component really required there. And those camps have yielded some athletes who made the national team and Paralympic team. I think we had, I think Jacqueline Smith came to us through a USABA camp actually, and Laura Goodkind came to us through a development camp. I think as did Russell, her doubles partner from the Tokyo Games. So yeah, we need to do more of those. A development camp is probably the right way to go. I'm looking for some ways to introduce that. I mean, that's a great idea. We could have more of a development level type of speed order, which is just people coming together. I think the challenge is equipment and travel is really, really hard. This is why I'm trying to focus on regattas that are already exist that we can augment. And I think probably the Beata is one that comes to mind in Philadelphia, generally in August. It is oftentimes for a lot of people their very first para rowing race. So in terms of like low stakes, high support, that they've been doing it for years. Probably the most experienced regatta that caters exclusively to athletes with disabilities of a broad range. Amazing staff there. So I would say if it's reasonable for you to get to Philadelphia, that is probably the best place to begin for that sort of quote unquote low stakes, but still a lot of fun. And it's a great regatta.
That's all I'm seeing for right now in the Q&A and in the chat.
Okay. Well, again, I appreciate everyone's input. I appreciate your time tonight because it's like really encouraging. I'm just seeing people from all over the country, which is just fabulous. And you guys are the future. The more you know, the more you can share this knowledge with people in your community, the more people are going to come out for para or inclusion rowing. And then when we have more people on the water, we will be able to have, a real pyramid of successful athletes with appropriate developmental experiences. And I'm just really excited for 2024, but really 2028, because this stuff takes time. Building a pipeline is a 3, 4, 5-year process, and we're already in a shortened year with a shortened cycle with the lead up to Paris. So we understand, and we are really trying to play the long game here. So stay patient with us, and we'll stay patient with you. But we just want to, bring more people involved in the sport and make it awesome. All right, Tom, any last words?
No, I think that's great. Just excited about the future.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. And I think this will be posted on the website, but you'll get all the follow-up information from your registration. And thank you so much.